London and Toronto listed lithium company Bacanora Minerals is preparing the ground for the construction of its lithium project in Mexico. Follows the feasibility study giving a net present value or NPV to the deposit at $1.25 billion with an internal rate of return at 26%. Its aim is to supply battery-grade lithium to the big battery producers, 95% of whom are in Asia. Peter Secker is Chief Executive. He joins us now. Congratulations, first of all, on the feasibility study, because this takes you on a lot, doesn't it? Where do you go now from here, having got that in the bag?
Well, that's in the bag. Nice thing is it shows that we're going to be lowest quartile of operating costs, which means we're a very bankable project. So the next thing is to raise some equity and some debt to prepare for project construction. And we want to be actually working in the ground by the end of the second quarter this year, which would have us developing the project by the end of 2019 and in production in Q1 2020. So a fairly fast-track development timetable.
You've got a lot of things going on in there at the moment. The capital cost then, what is the figure you're looking at?
So we'd raise $420 million of total capex, and that'll be split between equity and debt. Obviously on the equity side we have some strong supportive shareholders, BlackRock and M&G and Igneous Hamwa, the off-taker capital group. So we're looking to those institutions for support and some new shareholders out of North America and Asia.
Yeah, looking down the register, it's interesting. Since we last spoke a couple of years ago, I mean, these are substantial interested parties now, aren't they? I think BlackRock, you mentioned, Igneous and so forth, they're all around about 10%.
Correct.
So they're obviously going to have a big input in terms of the way the business is run and what you're doing. How much of the money that you're hoping to raise is going to come from them?
Well, they're currently 50% of our institutional shareholder base, of our total capital base. So we'd like them to follow their money. And then, as I say, new shareholders coming out of North America and Asia.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, where we see ourselves is, of the new lithium carbonate producers, we see ourselves being first cab off the rank. So
yeah.
People want to take advantage of.
What about the permitting?
Yes, so we've worked very hard on the permitting for the last couple of years. All our environmental permitting was completed at the end of last year, so the EIS, or the MIA as it's known in Mexico. On top of that, we also purchased the land that surrounds the project, so we now have free access, and we own 100,000 hectares of land in Sonora. So we're permitted and we're ready to start construction in Q2 next year.
You said last time about the importance of milestones along the way, and clearly with the feasibility study now under your belt and this lower cost base to the end product, I think you're now talking, as you said, about $4,000 per tonne. I think lithium sells, what, 13,000 at the moment. Where do you stand in terms of some of the other big competitors that are out there at the moment in terms of costs?
Yeah, I mean, for the downstream producers who produce carbonate, Chile is the lowest cost of production, around sort of $35,000 to $4,000 a tonne, and then go across to Argentina, $4,000 to $4,500 a tonne. So we're very cost competitive with the low-cost mines in Chile, and we would see ourselves as lowest quartile.
So what are the supply and demand dynamics at the moment in the lithium market?
Very much driven by the Chinese. I mean, the Chinese top-down approach to electric vehicles says that they want to have 25% of all their vehicles electric by 2020 and 50% by 2025. So a significant amount of vehicles, 1 million last year, probably 2.5 million next year, moving down that electrification process. And then on top of that, you've got the Germans, who 3 or 4 years ago very much focused on the diesel standards, now moving down the electrification process. And again, 25% of German vehicles to be electric by 2025. So at the moment, the lithium market is growing at somewhere between 18 and 20% year on year, one of the fastest growing of all the commodities.
I'm interested as well to talk a little bit more about the board, because again, when we last spoke a couple of years ago, you were talking then about you're surrounded by people that had built up mines before, sure. And you proved that aspect, yes. Of it. And I was asking then about the input coming through from those that are up to date in terms of finance. I think you've changed the board structure a bit. What's going on?
We brought on obviously a group that has much more financial acumen. Eileen Carr has joined the board. She's got a finance background. Jamie Strauss, broking and finance. And more importantly, we've just put on a new CFO. Janet Boyce will, I guess, make sure that we have enough financing moving forward and control the financing as we go to spend $420 million. So there's a lot happening on the finance side, on the compliance side, and we're still growing the group in Mexico. We currently have 40 operators down there. We'll grow that to about 80 operators over the next 6 months. We still operate the pilot plant, we're still producing samples for the Asian market, and we'll continue to operate those plants, continue to train people, continue to grow the workforce over the next 18 months.
Yeah, November, a year or so ago, Donald Trump came to the White House and is famously talking about walls and so forth between America and Mexico. Has the relationship there between the White House and Mexico affected any way in which you are operating within the country?
No, I mean, we've never focused on the States. All of our markets have always been Japanese focused. Hanwha, our off-taker and our shareholder, is Japan-based, probably the largest trader of battery chemicals in Japan. So all of our product will go out of Mexico to Japan. We have very little interaction with the US.
Let's bring up a share price chart. We can get a better idea as to what's been happening recently. This is a daily chart. This goes back to the beginning of 2014. This most recent uptick here, what's priced in and what's been happening with shares recently? Currently trading at 103.95 here in London.
So that really was the bankable feasibility coming out just before Christmas, and a bit of press about that early in the new year. So people excited by where we sit on the cost curve, people excited by the net present value, and knowing that we're going to be the next major lithium carbonate producer.
What do you see as the next big thing for the share price? What do you see as the steps that you're going to be taking which prove that you're on target?
So financing is a big step. We need to demonstrate that in Q2 this year. We need to start work actually on site. That'll be end of Q2. And then a series of construction milestones through to the end of 2019. So really a very physical project with a lot of visible milestones.
Good. Well, best of luck with everything, and thanks indeed for dropping by here at IG. Peter, it's a pleasure indeed for us too. Peter Secker is Chief Executive of Bacanora Minerals. Subscribe to IG for educational content, company insight, financial analysis and expert commentary.